Parker tried to cut Alice out completely. But jealousy has a way of dragging the truth into the light. And the moment Alice lost control, she said the one thing neither of them could take back. This is an original fictional story. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or to actual events is purely coincidental. After that day, I cut Alice off so completely it almost became a second job. Not a dramatic cutoff. No shaking hands. No crying in the garage. No midnight paragraphs I would regret later. I simply removed access. At work, I became precise to the point of cruelty. Meetings only. Data only. If she asked me a direct question in a room full of people, I answered it cleanly and moved on. If she appeared near my desk, I found a reason to stand. If she entered a room, I adjusted without looking like I adjusted. I took different elevators when I could. Different exits when I couldn't. I stopped lingering on terraces after hours. I stopped checking whether she had messaged, which was easy, because she barely did. That was the first sign things were wrong. Alice Bradley, who could have filled a week with sharp little provocations and beautiful bad timing, went almost silent. Not completely. She still existed, which was the real problem. Still at the head of conference tables. Still in boardrooms with that impossible poise. Still in pale silk and severe tailoring. Still speaking with that calm, low authority that made other people shift their thinking half a sentence before they realized she had led them there. But whatever part of her had been leaning toward me with heat and pursuit had gone still. Not gone. Still. And stillness on Alice felt unnatural. Miami kept shining around us as if nothing had happened. That was the insulting part. The city did not care that I had finally let someone under my skin, only to find out she came with a pattern and a warning label. The bay still flashed under the sun. The towers still glittered. Rooftop bars still filled with women in impossible dresses, and men wearing watches that could probably pay off a mortgage in Ohio. The whole place still looked like desire had incorporated and gone public. At the office, my life became all clean lines. Numbers. Reports. Forecasting decks. A schedule packed tightly enough to leave less room for thought. If I woke up thinking about the terrace, I answered emails before coffee. If I remembered the exact roughness in Alice's voice when she said please, I opened a spreadsheet. If I caught sight of her through glass, I fixed my attention somewhere else and reminded myself that attraction is not character, intensity is not trust, and being wanted by a woman like Alice Bradley is not the same thing as being safe with her. I got very good at that speech. I repeated it often enough that it began to sound like policy. The problem with policy is that sometimes the market moves anyway. A week into the Cold War, Mike stopped by my desk just after lunch with a folder in one hand and a look on his face that suggested he had slept poorly and blamed at least one executive for it. "Walk with me," he said. I stood, grabbed my notebook, and followed him down the hall toward one of the smaller strategy rooms overlooking the water. The afternoon sun had turned the bay silver white. Boats moved like bright little cuts through the glare. Inside, the air was cold enough to make the glass feel stern. Mike closed the door behind us. For a second, neither of us said anything. Then he leaned one hand on the back of a chair and looked at me with the kind of directness powerful men only use when they have decided diplomacy has become inefficient. "You heard us." I met his gaze. "Yes." He nodded once, unsurprised. "I'm not going to insult you by pretending that conversation sounded good out of context. That would be a bold strategy." His mouth twitched, but it wasn't amusement. "Not really. I was trying to protect two things at once," he said. "My company and my sister. I'm aware one of those probably sounds ridiculous to you right now. I'm not sure ridiculous is the word I'd choose." "Fair." He looked out at the water briefly, then back at me. "Alice is not easy. You've gathered that. That is one way to phrase it. She moves too fast when something matters to her. Faster when she's afraid it might matter more than she wants it to." I said nothing. He went on anyway. "The part you overheard about patterns wasn't invented. But neither was the part where she said this was different." His expression tightened. "I should have given you room to hear more than the worst minute of that conversation." My grip shifted on the notebook in my hand. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because the last 10 days have turned my sister into a person I barely recognize." He exhaled slowly. And while I'm still annoyed with her on principle, I'm starting to suspect you may have done something to her that no one else has in years. That should not have mattered. It did. I hated that it did. She should have said that herself, I replied. Yes, Mike said simply. She should have. He left it there, which I respected more than I wanted to. No lecture. No push. No request that I go easy on her. Just the truth set down between us like a file neither of us was eager to sign. By the time I got back to my desk, I was more irritated than before. Not less irritated. Because now I had one more piece of information I had not asked for, one more thing complicating a situation I was trying very hard to keep clean. That afternoon, Alice entered a quarterly review 10 minutes late. 10 minutes late. People noticed. They hit it well, because people at that level always hit it well. But they noticed. Alice was never late. She came in wearing a black suit so sharply cut it looked almost severe, but the effect was ruined, or maybe humanized, by the fact that she had no jacket on and her hair was not quite as controlled as usual. Nothing sloppy. Alice would die before she became sloppy in public. But not perfect either. Not the usual cold brilliance of line and intention. She took her seat, offered one brief apology to the room, then went quiet and focused and devastatingly articulate for the next 40 minutes, dismantling a weak proposal from one of the outside consultants with such elegant precision that the man thanked her while visibly bleeding out. Still, I noticed. Because once you've kissed someone on a terrace and heard them ask you not to hate them, you notice stupid things. The extra coffee at her place setting. The way she rubbed once at the bridge of her nose when everyone else was looking at the screen. The fact that when her attention drifted for half a second, it drifted to me. Not with flirtation. With hunger held under discipline. That was worse. Later that week, I walked into the executive lounge to grab a bottle of water and found Mike's daughter sitting at the long table in her school uniform, legs swinging, crayons spread everywhere. Alice sat beside her. Not in some polished ant pose for public consumption. Not in the elegant, slightly detached way certain wealthy women perform affection when other people are watching. No. She was genuinely there. Sleeves rolled. Hair pushed back. One knee angled toward the little girl while she listened, with grave seriousness, to an explanation of why a horse-drawn in glitter pen was obviously stronger than market anxiety. I stopped in the doorway. Alice looked up. For a single second, the expression that crossed her face was not prepared. It was relief. Quick, involuntary, gone almost as soon as I recognized it. Mike's daughter turned and brightened. Parker. Aunt Alice says my horse has strategic value. I set my water bottle on the counter and walked farther in because refusing to interact with a 7-year-old would have been sociopathic. I'm with her, I said. That horse definitely looks over-leveraged but highly motivated. The little girl laughed, delighted. Alice's mouth tilted. There was a faint smear of silver glitter near her wrist. I saw it. She saw me see it. And for the first time in days, a tiny flash of the old private heat moved through the room. Over-leveraged, the little girl asked. It means ambitious, Alice said dryly. That is not what it means, I told her. It means ambitious with consequences, she said, not looking away from me. The line landed exactly where she intended it to. I should have left immediately. Instead, I stayed 3 extra minutes discussing glitter horses and risk exposure with a child and a woman I was trying not to love in a room full of filtered sunlight and polished stone. That evening, if you had looked at me from a distance, you would have thought I was doing very well. I left on time. I answered 2 work messages from home. I reheated leftovers and opened my laptop and reviewed a regional performance deck while the city glowed beyond my apartment windows like it had never once in its life respected boundaries. Inside, I was a mess. Not because I doubted I had been hurt. That part was still true. Not because I suddenly trusted Alice again. I didn't. But because pain gets complicated when the person who caused it does not fit neatly into the villain role you assign them for self-defense. Alice kept breaking the shape I was trying to hold her in. Every time I decided she was only appetite and arrogance, some quieter, steadier truth about her showed up and ruined the structure. The next Friday, the company hosted one of those semi-formal donor-adjacent evenings that powerful people call casual, because no one there has to ask what anything costs. Not a full gala. Smaller. Meaner. More intimate. A private club on the water in Coconut Grove, all dark wood and warm lighting and terraces draped in white fabric that moved in the wind. The kind of place where old money pretended to enjoy simplicity while drinking champagne that tasted like inherited confidence. Attendance was encouraged, which meant mandatory for anyone with career instincts. I almost skipped it. Then I remembered that avoiding rooms because of Alice was beginning to feel too much like surrender, and I hated surrender on principle. So I went. I wore a midnight blue dress that had no business looking as dangerous as it did. Long, fluid, cut close through the waist with a neckline that wasn't dramatic until the light hit it, and suddenly every line mattered. My hair was down. My heels were less practical than they should have been. I looked like a woman who had made a decision and wasn't ready to explain it. When I arrived, the terrace doors were open to the bay. Music drifted low from somewhere inside. Conversations overlapped in well-funded murmur. White candles flickered in hurricane glass. Miami stretched beyond the railing in jeweled fragments, every tower reflected twice in the black water below. Alice was already there. Of course she was. She stood near the far bar in ivory again, because at this point I suspected she wore pale colors partly to aggravate me personally. Silk blouse, high-waisted black trousers, gold at her throat, hair loose tonight, bright and expensive in the candlelight. She was speaking to an older investor with that composed, attentive expression she used when she wanted a man to feel smart while she quietly outmaneuvered him. And then she looked up, found me, stopped. Not physically. Nothing so obvious. But some current in her changed so sharply I felt it from 20 feet away. Her gaze moved over me once. One slow, controlled pass. And whatever cool civility had been holding her together all week took a visible hit. I should have found that satisfying. I did. For about 3 seconds. Then the trouble started. Not with Alice. With Owen Mercer. He was not important enough to deserve a dramatic introduction, which is precisely why men like him become annoying in expensive rooms. Tall, polished in that generic way certain finance-adjacent men are polished, old family name, new smile, too comfortable in spaces where women are expected to laugh half a beat before they want to. I had met him once before at a strategy lunch. He remembered that I challenged him on a lazy market assumption. Apparently he mistook this for chemistry. He found me near the terrace. "Parker," he said, pleased with himself. "You clean up even better than your spreadsheets." I gave him a neutral smile. That is a horrifying sentence. He laughed like I had rewarded him. "Can I get you a drink?" "I'm covered." "Come on. Don't do that thing smart women do where they act like being admired is inconvenient." I looked at him fully then. "Being admired isn't inconvenient," I said. "Being misread is." That should have done it. It did not. He stayed. Talked. Leaned a little too comfortably into my space while saying nothing I could technically call offensive enough to justify making a scene. This is another ugly talent some men cultivate, plausible deniability wrapped in persistence. He asked whether I had come alone. He asked whether Bradley Capital was keeping me busy enough. He asked if I ever got tired of being the smartest person in the room. I was deciding how quickly to cut off circulation to the conversation when a familiar low voice arrived at my shoulder. "She does," Alice said. "Particularly when the room insists on proving it." Owen turned. Alice stepped into the space beside me like she had every right in the world. Not rushed. Not frantic. Not loud. That was what made it dangerous. She looked perfect. Calm. Elegant. Glass of champagne in one hand, the other resting lightly at her side. But I knew her well enough by then to see the truth in the details. The set of her jaw, the sharpened focus in her eyes, the controlled stillness that usually meant some internal line had just been crossed. "Owen," she said with effortless civility. "I wasn't aware you two knew each other well enough for cornering." He gave a thin smile. "We were talking. I can see that." "She doesn't seem upset." Alice turned her head slightly and looked at me. Just looked. The question in her eyes was precise and private. "Do you want me to remove him?" I should have hated that she understood the situation instantly. Instead, I felt a pulse of relief so immediate it almost made me angry. "I was about to leave for air," I said. Alice's gaze returned to Owen. "There. Solved." He laughed again, but less comfortably this time. You Bradley people really do think you own the floor. Alice's expression did not change. No, she said. Just our standards. It was such an Alice answer that part of me wanted to groan. Instead, I said nothing, because her hand had come to rest lightly at the small of my back as she guided me toward the terrace doors, and all of my attention had become stupid. Outside, the wind was warmer. Salter. Real. Music softened behind the glass. The bay below the club caught strips of gold and white from the lights above. Boats moved like silent little verdicts through the dark. Alice kept walking until we were alone near the far railing beneath a row of dim lanterns. Then she let go of my back. Are you all right? She asked. There was anger in her voice still, but not for me. I set my glass on the railing and exhaled. Yes. He was irritating. Yes. Her mouth tightened. That is a charitable word for it. I turned toward her. I can handle irritating men, Alice. I know you can. Then why did you look ready to throw him into the bay? She looked at me for one brief, naked second. And because she was Alice, she could have lied beautifully there. Could have said something smooth about optics or professional discomfort or saving me the hassle. She didn't. Because he kept looking at you like you were available, she said. That landed harder than it should have. I folded my arms lightly over myself, less as defense than as structure, and I didn't like it. The wind moved a pale strand of hair across her cheek. She didn't fix it. Her eyes stayed on mine. And that would be your problem, not mine. Yes, she said quietly. It is. The honesty of it opened something jagged in the silence between us. Inside, someone laughed over music and glass. Outside, the air wrapped warm around my bare shoulders. Alice stood in front of me looking so composed that only a fool would miss how close to the edge she actually was. Don't do this tonight, I said softly. Do what? Look at me like you're one sentence away from losing your mind. A humorless smile touched her mouth. That's optimistic. I've been much closer than one sentence for days. I looked away first. Because of course I did. The city glittered beyond the railing like it wanted credit for the scene. Alice. My tone must have changed something in her, because when I turned back, the restraint had thinned even further. Do you know what it's been like? She asked. I stared at her. There's a question I probably shouldn't answer. No, she said. Probably not. But she kept going anyway. Watching you walk into rooms and refuse to look at me. Hearing you laugh with other people and knowing I'm the one who put distance there. Seeing you with my brother's kids. Seeing you in meetings. Seeing you at your desk. And not touching you because you made it clear I hadn't earned the right. Her jaw flexed once. I know why you did it. I deserved it. That has not made it easier. The wind shifted the fabric of my dress against my legs. I said nothing, which was apparently the final mistake. Because just then the terrace doors opened again. Owen stepped out. God help him. He had the timing of a man who had never once in his life been correctly warned. There you are, he said, looking at me and not at Alice. I figured I'd rescue you from corporate politics. Alice went still beside me. Not rigid. Still. That kind of stillness that means fire has just chosen a shape. Owen, I said sharply, go back inside. He smiled at me like I was being playful. Alice's voice came low and cutting. That was unambiguous. He finally looked at her then, irritation surfacing where charm had run out. You don't get to decide every room, Alice. No, she said. But I do get to decide when I'm done being polite. He glanced between us. And maybe it was the week. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the months of wanting things to stay manageable and failing. Whatever it was, the atmosphere shifted fast enough to feel physical. Owen looked at me again and said, with that same easy entitlement, if she's making you uncomfortable, you can come with me. That did it. Alice moved before I thought she would. One step. Then another. Not toward him violently. Not enough to cause a scene. Just enough that the entire terrace suddenly belonged to her. Enough, she said. The word cracked through the warm night clean as glass. Owen stopped. I stopped breathing. Alice looked at me. Not him. Me. Her eyes were dark and furious, and completely done pretending this was about manners. You're mine. Silence. The bay below us. The music behind us. The lantern light. The heat. Everything went still around that sentence. It would have been easier if it had sounded crude. It didn't. It sounded like something torn out of her against her own better judgment. Possessive, yes. Furious, yes. But beneath both of those, true in a way that hit me right in the center of the chest. Owen's expression changed from smug to alarmed in record time. I looked at Alice. At the woman standing in ivory silk and beautiful rage, chest rising once, hard, as if the words had cost her something. Then I heard my own voice. Am I? Soft. Sharp. Incredulous enough to make it a challenge. Owen, finally recognizing he had become background to a much more dangerous situation, muttered something about finding another drink and disappeared back through the terrace doors, so fast it was almost funny. Neither of us watched him go. Alice's gaze never left mine. Say that again, she said. What? Ask me. The wind caught my hair and threw it briefly across my face. I pushed it back with unsteady fingers. Am I? I repeated. Her whole expression shifted. Not gentler. Worse. More open. More ruined. If you need proof, she said, voice low and absolutely steady now, then we'll get married. I stared at her. The city seemed to tilt slightly to the left. You cannot possibly be serious. She stepped closer. One pace. Enough that I could smell her perfume again under the sea air, that dry amber citrus note I had been trying not to remember for weeks. I am done watching you run from me because I made a mess of the first honest thing I've felt in years, she said. I am done pretending this is temporary because that would be more convenient for everyone else. I am done with these games, Parker. Her breath caught very slightly, then steadied. You are not a phase. You are not a pattern. You are not some bright little obsession I'll burn through and forget. Her eyes searched mine, fierce and unguarded at once. You are the only woman who has ever made me regret every lazy version of wanting that came before her. I could not move. Could not even think in a straight line. Alice went on, because once she started telling the truth, she seemed suddenly incapable of stopping. Somewhere between the first night, the boardroom, the way you kept saying no while still looking at me like that, the way you refused to let me charm my way out of being better, she let out one short, disbelieving breath. I fell in love with you. The sentence hit like weather. No cushion. No warning. I haven't felt like this since I was a stupid 17-year-old who thought one girl in senior year had basically invented the concept of breath, she said. That is humiliating information, and I'm giving it to you anyway. Despite everything, despite the shock, despite the anger still alive in me, a fractured, disbelieving laugh nearly escaped. Alice's mouth moved as if she wanted to smile back, but emotion got there first. So yes, she said. If you need proof, I'll marry you. If you need time, I'll wait. If you need me to spend the next year earning back the ground I ruined, I'll do that too. Her voice dropped lower. But don't stand there and ask whether you're mine like it's some game I'm playing. I'm standing here telling you you already have more of me than anyone ever has. I had imagined 1,000 apologies in my life. Imagined dramatic ones, polished ones, manipulative ones, late-night ones that arrived too pretty to trust. This was none of those. This was Alice Bradley, who usually moved through rooms like she had negotiated the lighting, standing in Miami dark with her composure split open and offering me the most irrationally serious thing I had ever heard. My heart was beating so hard it had become difficult to interpret the rest of me. Anger was still there. So was hurt. So was want. Got the want. And under all of it, something more terrifying than any of those, belief. Because the worst part, the part that made my knees feel less reliable than they should have, was that I believed her. Not blindly, not easily, but with the deep, involuntary certainty of a body that recognizes truth before the mind has finished objecting. We stood there in it. Wind. Water. Music behind glass. Her eyes on mine. Mine on hers. No room left for performance. If you're still here with me, somewhere between the terrace and that impossible sentence, hit like and subscribe. Stories like this only keep breathing when real people show up for them. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and whether you would have walked away or stayed after that confession. I swallowed once. You do understand that proposing marriage as an argument is objectively insane. Yes, Alice said immediately. That is not reassuring. No, she said. It probably isn't. I left then. I couldn't help it. Not because anything was funny. Because I was too overwhelmed not to. The sound broke something in both of us. Some unbearable tension gave way just enough to let air back into the scene. Alice looked almost wrecked by the fact that I had laughed instead of leaving. That's a terrible sign, I said more to myself than to her. What is? The part where that line should have made me furious, and instead I'm trying not to think about how good you look while losing your mind. A real smile flickered through the ruin on her face. I am not losing my mind. You told me we should get married on a terrace because another man annoyed you. He did more than annoy me. That is not the point. No, she said. The point is that I meant it. I looked at her for a long time. Then I asked the only honest question left. How long until you get restless, Alice? There. The wound itself laid open. She didn't flinch. That mattered. Instead, she took one breath, then another, and answered with the steadiness of someone who knew this was the line that counted. I don't know how to prove the future in a single night, she said. I can't give you a contract against human weakness. I can only tell you that I have never once in my life been bored by being truly seen, and you see me so clearly it terrifies me. Her gaze did not move. Restless is what happens to me around the shallow version of wanting. I hated hearing my brother say those things, she continued. Not because he invented them. Because parts of them used to be true enough to hurt you. I should have found you before any of that reached you through a door. Yes, I said quietly. I know. The simplicity of that nearly undid me more than the confession had. For a second I looked away toward the water, because the alternative was standing there and letting Alice watch every emotion cross my face in real time, and I was not that brave. When I turned back, she was exactly where she had been. Not pushing. Not reaching. Waiting. That, too, mattered. Alice. The sound of her name came out softer than I intended. Her eyes changed immediately. I do not forgive you yet. I know. I am still angry. I know. And I have absolutely no idea what I'm supposed to do with the fact that you just told me you'd marry me. That brought the faintest crookedness to her mouth. Neither do I, honestly. This was not my most strategic evening. Despite myself, I smiled. A real smile this time. Small. Brief. Impossible to stop. Her whole face changed when she saw it. Not triumphant. Worse. Hopeful. There are few things more dangerous than hope on a woman who usually wears certainty instead. I took a step back. Not away exactly. Just back enough to breathe without drowning in her. I need time, I said. Alice nodded once, immediate. You have it. I'm serious. So am I. You can't say things like that and expect me to just. I don't, she cut in softly. Parker, I don't expect anything tonight except that you know the truth now. The truth. I looked at her. At the wind moving her hair. The pale fabric of her blouse stirring lightly at the waist. The stubborn steadiness in her gaze. The visible restraint in every inch of her body, as if reaching for me right now would be the easiest thing in the world, and she was refusing herself on purpose. The truth, apparently, looked a lot like the worst kind of temptation. Because now the danger had changed shape again. It wasn't just that Alice wanted me. It was that she loved me. And somehow that was even harder to fight. Inside, through the glass, someone had started another song. Slower this time. Warmer. The kind of music rich people pretend not to hear while making life-changing mistakes in formal wear. I should go, I said. Alice's throat moved once as she swallowed, but she nodded. All right. I turned. Made it 3 steps toward the terrace doors. Then stopped. Not because she called me back. Because I could still feel her there behind me, standing in the warm dark with all that impossible honesty between us, and some part of me wanted one more thing before I left. I turned halfway. Alice was still watching me. Of course she was. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said, because it was the most honest sentence I had, the worst part is that I believe you. Something almost painful crossed her face. Hope again. Relief this time too. Good, she said very softly. I shook my head once. That is not permission. I know. I held her gaze another second, longer than was safe, long enough to feel the pull of her all the way down to the bone. Then I left. The terrace doors closed behind me with a muted sound that felt much too small for what had just happened. Inside, the party still moved. Champagne, candlelight, music, people in beautiful clothes making intelligent small talk under low lamps, as if the world were made of elegant surfaces and not private detonations. I walked through it all like a woman carrying something lit in both hands. And that was the cliff edge of it. Not the confession. Not even the proposal. The cliff edge was knowing, with terrible clarity, that I had not walked away because I didn't care. I had walked away because I cared enough that the next answer might change everything. If this part got to you, like the story, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what hit hardest: Alice stepping in, the line on the terrace, or the marriage challenge. In part 5, Parker has to decide whether love is worth the risk. Alice has to prove she can be more than intensity, and the answer changes both of their lives for good.